There were a lot of federal agents there. There were a lot of protesters there. There's a mixture of individuals within that crowd. Were there paid protesters at that event?
This is more of a speculative question because we had no involvement in that.
You are literally controlling a robot army of sorts of AI that are protesting events. I see that occurring. When I think about the First Amendment, it's supposed to apply to humans. And I'm sure there will be plenty of legal battles on this in the future.
That's not true. It applies to, it was a human that ordered the robots to be there. It's no different than advertised. I would say it's unequivocally the robots should be able to protest.
All right, Adam, thanks so much for joining me this morning. Welcome to the Cameron Brown Show.
Hey, Cameron, so awesome to be with you today.
Yeah, glad to have you here, Adam. I got a million different questions, so this is gonna be a really fun one today. I have had organizations basically create protests around events that I've thrown previously, and also over the past, especially 10 years, just watching protests online and on TV and seeing these things unfold. I think a lot of people are just curious to know a lot more about what that world looks like. So I really appreciate you joining. But to kickstart things, I want to let you give us a little bit of a background on yourself and what got you into this world of protest organization to begin with.
Okay, well, there's no degree in protesting, so you really have to figure it out yourself a little bit. So, went to college at UCLA, that's in Los Angeles, California. And then I really was involved in politics a lot in college, mostly on the Democratic side. I like to say I'm very much independent today. But I was very involved in a lot of campaigns, managed like student action for, the gubernatorial race back then and a bunch of local, whatever kind of elections. And one of the things that I found working in politics at that time was that the people running those campaigns were boomers who had come of age in an era of immense activism. So I remember these older guys would be like, Adam, get us a couple thousand college students to this rally. And it's like, whoa, like in your day, that was an easy feat, free pizza on the quad or even no pizza, just get on the quad, for whatever the social justice issue was of that age, and you would do it because number one, people were very engaged, but number two, there was very little competition for engagement, right? It was basically, I guess the boomers can correct us because we're both not boomers, obviously, but the things that people did, in my impression, was free love, smoke weed, and get involved in whatever social justice activism was. That was college in the 60s and 70s, I'm guessing, right? So as a result, these guys would be like, Adam, get me all these protesters, get me these people at the rally. And it was a lot harder in that era, in this sort of different kind of era. So I got to kind of figuring out, how do you get people out to these events, right? How do you turn out? And then what I also found in the course of all of this is you can have a rally, and that's great. But it's almost more effective to have a protest, because you can have someone else can have a rally. They can get their 2,000 people together. I just have to put 10 people out front, and I can get a third, if not half, of the media attention that they got with a fraction of a percent of the actual number of people that they had, if my message is compelling and if my message is targeted to the relevant media outlets who I think are going to be interested in covering that, right? So I really got to kind of see that. I worked a lot of random jobs in college, but I also worked as a news reporter for several months at one point. So I got to see it from a media side and see kind of how desperate media is to constantly have coverage. And what you have with a protest is you're giving them a visual, and they need a visual. And that was certainly true in the kind of 2012, 2011, but it's true today in a slightly different way, and almost more so with social media. So I really kind of saw these opportunities. Then the other thing I saw is, okay, we're in Los Angeles, right? What do we have in LA? We have out-of-work actors. So I was like, my initial kind of thought was to put two and two together. You have these people who are in huge need of attendees, and then you have out-of-work actors who are very theatrical, who are good at playing into a role. So this was a gig economy before that term even existed. So I was like, well, why don't I put these out of work actors in with the people who need the team, so we give them some money and then they get their attendees, right? So this has kind of served to haunt me for this past like 15 years that I've been doing this business, because now we actually provide a lot of activists and people very sincere about a cause, but the media will still say, oh, he's staffing these political events with actors, which is not strictly true. So my original business model is really like sort of haunts me still, which is hilarious. But you know, it is what it is. I mean, it was my business model, so I can't bemoan that too much. But at any rate, so that's where I'm at today, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm here.
I just really appreciate the honesty. I think that more than anything, I think it's good that people realize that these things happen just in general. Like,
Yeah.
and once again, this is the business model. It's almost an auxiliary service to like a media company. I mean, you're a media guy, you're a marketing guy. This is literally just an auxiliary service to support media in and of
That's
itself to get your message across. But I think a lot of people when they watch things online, everything is so theatrical nowadays. Everything seems so inflated and so divisive, almost creating controversy in and of itself gets eyeballs and gets impressions, right? And
Yes.
so we know that as a society. And I think it's frustrating when you know that you're almost being played across the board. And I'm not saying that that's what you're doing necessarily, but at the end of the day, you are hiring people to serve in an actor type role to go to a protest. But there are also those individuals, it sounds like nowadays, that are more so activists that frankly also just want to get paid to support the things that they believe in.
It's a good question.
But the biggest question is what percentage of those people are actors still versus actually activists that believe in what they are protesting?
Well, it's a good question. Well, I can comment with 100% certainty on my work, and I can speculate on what the broader trends, right? So in regards to our work, when we do political events, right, or advocacy events, I mean, we don't work for candidates very often. Sometimes, yes, but mostly not. Mostly we're working for issues. And we try to establish 100% of everybody working on a protest around an issue with people who agree with that issue. Number one, because they're more effective for the client, right? So if you want to have people out there, do you want to have people who don't care about the issue or are going to look stupid on TV, right? Or do you want to have someone, if you're doing a protest that says we should not defund the Minneapolis Police Department, do you want to have somebody who doesn't give a crap about that? Or do you want to have somebody who says, hey, my store was broken into because we didn't have enough police, and this is why we need to have more police? You know, I was mugged because there wasn't enough police, so this is why we need to have more police. So which one is more effective? So this isn't a moral judgment. This is actually a purely effectiveness judgment. But you know, one thing that I slightly disagree with the premise of, though, is like, you know, you use the word getting played, right? So people are trying to, as if that's a new trend. So I would use the word, people are always trying to market to you,
Right.
number one,
Right.
and that has not changed. That has not gotten, now the marketing techniques have gotten more sophisticated, right? Because especially the social media has lent itself to being able to micro-target, yes.
Right.
But people have been targeting you with ads for your entire life, for my entire life, and for more or less the entire life of humanity. People have been attempting, the Romans and the Greeks had messaging people who would try to message things in an appropriate way to try to get the maximum support. So this isn't, the idea of trying to persuade people and message people using different arguments is not like a new thing. You know, even in the American Revolution, Sam Adams, you know, who was a publisher, and one of the major rabble rousers, right? We talk about this at the time that King Charles is in the United States, right? And he was a rabble rouser, and some of what Sam Adams spread was not actually truthful news about the British policies in the United States. So, you know, even our country was built by marketers, so to speak.
Yeah. And I think when you make that comment though too, obviously in a lot of the paid advertising that we see online too, like the algorithm knows us. There are paid individuals online that are acting in roles to support certain brands, like a Colgate or whatever the brand is, right? There are obviously plenty of paid actors online. I think more so the difference here is when you see like a picture of a crowd, which I've organized political events before as well, but I was on the right side of things. Now I'm also very independent, so I kind of did a separate transition to you, but very similar. But as it relates to kind of organizing crowds and making them look bigger, it was always a matter of let's bring in the students or let's bring in people to make this crowd look much larger for the picture specifically. So I'm assuming there's definitely a media aspect and there is a visibility aspect that's huge for your brand and helping certain organizations show that there are more people involved than maybe otherwise would have shown up. But I guess as a follow-up to that, as it relates to the moral aspect of this, does it not seem a little bit wrong to show people supporting a cause when there might not be that many people that actually support it across the nation, but it looks like in person there are more people supporting it, so it starts to make you question your own thinking?
Yeah, let's unpack that. So, let's unpack that. So, number one, what you're talking about is contextual marketing, right? So you're saying that people will take the same thing, but if it's presented in a different context, right? I often say, what if Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech was in front of 5 people, right? It was a beautiful speech, but it wouldn't have had that resonance versus when in actuality it was given before 1 million people, at least. That is my understanding, right? So, but I posed this same question. I was on sort of a somewhat heated debate with a couple of gentlemen who had a podcast, and they on their podcast they promote a brand of hard seltzer that I think has like bikini girls on it. And I said, well, why don't you just put a fat guy who lives in his mom's basement on your hard seltzer? I mean, it isn't the bikini girl deceptive, right? No, because they're trying to present their seltzer in the best possible context. And the best possible context of a seltzer is having a bikini girl on the cover, because it's like, oh, well, this is the endless summer kind of vibe that your seltzer is trying to market. So, now if I go back to my own experience in college, right? I remember being in freshman year of college before I started getting involved, and I saw Kamala Harris, and she was presenting actually at the dorms at UCLA, and there were like 5 people there, and 3 of them were people who worked for her, right? Same with Newsom, and same with all these kind of other people who I am sure at this point most of your audience knows who they are, right? So those people were, you could say they're good speakers or not, but they were not presenting themselves in the appropriate context because there was no one to see them, right? So the point is, I think that what we do is put causes, candidates, companies in the right context for then someone to be able to make that decision, right? But it's like there could be a delicious restaurant, wonderful restaurant, but if it's empty, a lot of people wouldn't even bother going, even if the food was good. So what I would say is, at the end of the day, if you prime the pump and then the gas isn't good, right, then people still aren't going to come back. And let me give you 2 examples. I mean, you may have heard of a guy named Jeb Bush who ran for president, right? Yep. Michael Bloomberg ran for president. Both of those guys had a ton of money, used all the techniques possible to get on the map, but ultimately they fizzled miserably and they humiliated themselves, right? And because why? Because money can't buy success, right? So what money buys and what crowds and all of that buy is the visibility. It forces people to take a look, but ultimately the product has to sell. So I guess my point is that I don't see it from I actually see it as very pure from a moral standpoint, because what we're doing is putting it on the map. Ultimately, if somebody is selling a load of horse crap, people are going to understand that, right? I mean, in your state, what is the name recognition of Lindsey Graham, right? It's probably 100%. But what is the feeling toward Lindsey Graham, maybe not so hot. I don't know, right? So Lindsey Graham is
Did
not.
you listen? Did you listen to one of my previous episodes? I believe you did.
Yeah, I did. I mean, like it
Yeah.
feels like when you say Lindsey, I know a lot of people from South Carolina, and whenever I mention Lindsey Graham, like it feels like people are like puking, and nonetheless, he's there, right? So, I guess my point being that that visibility can only get you so far.
Got it. Got it. So I think about like an organization that asks you, this is my kind of my big question here. But if, for example, an organization that you disagreed with came to you and said, hey, I need protesters at our rally. I'm just going to use a hardcore
Please do.
example. The KKK came to you and said, hey, Adam, we need 500 protesters at our rally. And they
That
were
would be
going to
a
provide
no.
you with, okay, right.
That'd be a no.
So this is,
That's a bona fide hate group. That's a little bit different also than saying I disagree, right? Because I work with a lot of causes that I may disagree with, but there's a disagree and there's something that, well, there's two reasons, by the way, that I might refuse something like what you're suggesting. So number one is obviously I disagree with them. That's true. But number two, it's putting my people at risk, right? Because if the KKK is doing an event, right, you're going to have massive security issues. You may have like a leftist group, on the other side of something like that, right? You're going to have a lot of authorities involved. So not only is it something that, yes, I don't agree with them, but there's also a practical reason that I wouldn't take something like that on, even if I had no morals about it.
Got it. Well, that's good to know. I'm glad to know there's a line. Is there a line, though, for all organizations like yours?
No, I mean, the part of why I'm speaking out is that there are people who don't market themselves, who don't go on podcasts, who you've never heard of, that are probably selling to the highest bidder or are doing either selling to the highest bidder. I mean, in fairness, there is nothing illegal about organizing a protest for the KKK. We have something called the First Amendment. So the KKK does have the right, and they should have the right to organize if they want to organize a peaceful demonstration, right, on their offensive views, right? So first of all, it's important to affirm that we live in a free country where even those who we strongly disagree with should have that right. Now, I think what's more concerning is that there are people out there who may be doing illegal activities, right? And that is a concern. And I don't care who you're doing it on behalf of, Antifa, BLM, KKK, whatever. If you're doing illegal activities, that is a serious problem.
I think back to January 6th because I think it's the most recent large protest that turned very sour for a lot of individuals. That particular event, there's now information that's come out. There were a lot of federal agents there. There were a lot of protesters there. There's a mixture of individuals within that crowd.
Yes.
Were there paid protesters at that event?
Well, so this is more of a speculative question because we had no involvement in that. So here's
in your opinion.
So let me give you a couple thoughts. Number one, I oppose any attempt by government to engage in what I call as entrapment, right? So government should and does have, presumably have a network of informants in various kind of groups that they think could be problematic, do engage in illegal activity to kind of report back. That's right. Okay. That's good because we want to know if certain groups that may have a lot of people doing things legally and some people doing things illegally, we want to know if someone's organizing something that's illegal.
Right.
The problem is when that turns into the government agents actively pushing the people to do something illegal. And unfortunately, there is a trend of this occurring, whether it was the Bush administration did this to Muslims, in the 2000s, right? And the Biden administration did this to conservatives, right? And And I don't know what's happening under this administration. I hope they're putting an end to it, but I'm not holding my breath. I don't like this concept of the government agents coming in and trying to push things along where otherwise they're not pushed along. So if that does occur, that is a major problem and a huge civil liberties violation. And I think that both parties need to really stand, take a step back and say that that's an unacceptable practice. And unfortunately, the targets of all of this tend to be, and they've done it with drug operations too, with non-political stuff too, is the targets of this tend to be people with really low IQs who are very persuadable. So maybe they say some dumb crap online, right? Which is their right. And then now some federal agent tries to push them to take their dumb crap and then do something horrible, right? Giving them the tools and spurring them along. Well, now they're creating a crime that out of something that wasn't a crime. So I instead of speculating where I don't know, I do want to take this opportunity to really condemn that practice. And as Americans, we have to condemn that practice, whether we agree with, even if we hate the group that they're going after, you know what I mean? And
I appreciate you providing an example of it happening from a right-wing perspective and a left-wing angle.
Yeah.
Both parties do this.
Yes,
this is not like one party is better than the other necessarily. They all do it. This is a grand strategy play. I think about, though, like from a grand strategy perspective, though, especially with some of these federal agents, I like to think, and once again, I've got a lot of guys that are in the military and serve in the government, work in the government, and they do wonderful jobs, and they're great people. This is not everybody, but there's always a small group of individuals that tend to have negative impact on the larger group. Anyways,
that's true.
But that being said, I feel like some of these federal agents probably just to a certain degree want to, there is an entrapment aspect here, but they want that like chest beating moment of, wow, I was the one that was able to get this person to jail because they're a terrible person and they attended the January 6th rally, or they attended this rally, or they did this or whatever. But then the other aspect of it is there a grand strategy at play up above that's moving these people around? And I think this is where I think maybe you come into play as a piece of this puzzle and a piece of the checker or the chessboard here that is kind of moving people into place. But what you're saying is that there's not a moral issue, in your opinion, of moving people into place to support these particular causes, because what your organization does is hopefully supports just causes.
I like to, I mean, in my opinion, so I like to support common sense causes. So just is a very, very moral judgment. I suppose so is common sense, but I don't have to.
That's very subjective too.
Very subjective. Right? So let me put it this way. I don't have to 100% agree with you to take on your cause. That would be absurd, right? And I have to believe that it is something that is worth airing out. I love to work with underdog causes a lot. So let me, and sometimes underdog causes don't remain underdog causes. So let me put it this way. 8 years ago, I started working with the cryptocurrency industry. I didn't own any crypto then. I don't own any crypto now, right? But I felt when they approached me, some of the big guys in crypto, they were being discriminated against. The entire financial system was rigged, not rigged, but it was stacked against them. Right from the bank system to the government, treasury, all of that was stacked against them, and they needed to be able to advocate, right? And protest was one of the vehicles, because at the time, the lobbying system, now they have so much money that they actually are able to influence that system. But at the time that I started working with them, they didn't have those resources or the know-how to be able to do that. So I was proud to have assisted that industry in kind of pushing its message in the early stages, because even though I didn't agree with it 100%, I was like, this needs to be advanced, right? This is ridiculous that the system is stacked against those people. So I don't have to 100% agree with your cause to take it on, but I do have to think, okay, there's some merit and it deserves to be heard.
Understood. Understood. I just think nowadays there's so much divisive rhetoric
Yes.
online, and it's good. Once again, it's good to hear directly from the people that are organizing these things.
Yes.
But to my question earlier about there being certain groups and certain individuals that'll take money from any group and any organization, I think that's wherein the problem lies, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
That
And I
is a
think
problem.
that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of here and try to figure out, because a big part of this show for me has been discernment.
Yes.
And you talked earlier about low IQ individuals, and I think even low IQ individuals have the ability to discern between good and evil.
Oh, yes.
And I think we need to work together to try to help everybody discern better between good and evil. And when we're being marketed to, certain things evoke emotions, and that's what, obviously a grand scheme of a marketer is to make sure we evoke certain emotions to get people to buy a product or a service
Yes.
or to play along. But how do we help people from this side of things, the consumer? How do we help the consumer to better discern between what is real and what is not real from what you've experienced and what you've already obviously
Yeah,
done in the past
and
15
by
years?
the way, Cameron, I want to be very clear. IQ in no way affects your ability to discern between good and evil. In fact, probably a lower IQ may kind of prevent you from becoming depraved in certain ways. But the IQ helps you discern who is trying to trick you and who is not. So someone who is lower IQ probably lacks discernment, although in fairness, I know plenty of very dumb, high IQ individuals as well. So I don't want to make a blanket statement.
I know plenty of dumb, smart people. I know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I don't feel as bad for them, I guess is my point. Like I feel my favorite movie is Forrest Gump. Literally my favorite movie. I watch it like once a year at least.
Yeah.
And it's like so I feel more for those people than I do for a dumb smart person who marries like a, Russian bride or something, mail order bride, and is like, okay, well, you're a professor at a high-end university and you think that girl loves you. It's like, okay, well, that's on you. I don't have to feel bad for you, but
I'm not asking you to listen back on all my episodes, but I've got some very, very smart people that have come on the podcast previously that know a whole lot about certain topics. And you ask them about other topics, and they're just absolutely clueless.
That's right.
Absolutely clueless. And I'm like, you are one of the smartest people I know. How do you not know this
Yeah,
necessarily?
it's true. It's very true.
Back
So
to, back to the. Back
So I
to
guess the
podcast.
question is discernment. Part of it is really it's harder now because if you go on X, Twitter, in particular, and I imagine other social networks, you see a lot of information that is flat out false. But with the power of AI, there's a lot of things that really look to be true, and you have to be very savvy. Like you can't just have a normal level of discernment. So, but the real question that I can't quite give you the answer to yet is where does being savvy and discerning turn into conspiracy minded and paranoid, right? Because there is this line between, okay, they're trying to trick me, and then now everything's a trap and everything is trying to trick me, right? And which is actually a trap that a lot of ultra high IQ people get into, which is complete paranoia and seeing trends everywhere, even where they don't exist. I mean, that's why a lot of ultra high IQ people may have, schizophrenia and other conditions, right? So that is like a tough thing, and this world is making us all a little bit more into conspiracy theorists. Of course, like they're like, oh no, they're like the Epstein issue, right? It's like it turns out like half of all the richest, most powerful people in the world are associated with this man, right? So which kind of validates certain things that conspiracy theorists have been telling us for a while and have been sort of laughed at for, right? So it's challenging. What you have to learn is primary sources. My one advice to your audience is primary sources. Like if you hear about a video about somebody or you heard someone say something, look for the sources, look for the full video, the unedited video. Do you see what I'm saying? Look for the original piece and then so number one, you have to do that. And the second part is you have to verify the authenticity of that source, right? so it's not easy. And my thing is, like, I understand that there's this kind of concern that what we do is part of the deception machine, whereas I don't see it that way. I actually see the one thing you can almost believe is what you see with your actual eyes. So you may not
For
believe what
now,
you see.
for now.
For now, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, we that in our lifetimes at least. I mean, I don't know whether there will be other things that will come up there, but like when you see a protester, a human being protest something, right? Talk to that human being. Ask that human being why are you here? Like, what do you believe, and what do you think? So you can really protest is actually an amazing thing because it actually transcends the manipulations of the internet.
Tries to.
Tries to.
Tries to.
Yes.
And I think this is more than anything, you see a lot of these clips online of like the individuals going to protest and they ask a protester a question. The protester has no idea what's going on. They're simply like, I just don't like the guy. It's like,
Yeah.
or this organization is awful. It's like, especially a lot of like the Roe versus Wade protest or, whatever protest. But across the board, people not being knowledgeable of these events, I think is the most frustrating thing when you watch
It
these
is
clips and you're like,
frustrating.
these things are all just a sham. Every bit of this protest is a sham. And like, what are these people not like, do they not have a day job to go to? How are they here? So there's a lot of questions that are going through my mind. So I think more than anything, it's just frustrating feeling as though somebody is going to an event being paid to be there to support a cause that they might not actually support. I know you're at the very beginning of this, you talked about these individuals being activists or you at least wanting them to be activists in order for them to get paid. But I do think it's just very important for people to understand that this is not conspiracy theory. This is not, everything nowadays is a conspiracy theory if it sounds outlandish that people get paid to go to protests. This is very real. Like this happens. Just like people get paid to act in movies, just like people get paid to act in commercials, just like people get paid to do a lot of different things. But I think it is good for people to know that and then be like, okay, just because there's a large group there doesn't necessarily mean that the majority of the world or the country
Well,
or our
that's
city.
100% correct. And it was, in fact, President Nixon who coined the term silent majority, right? So number one, so let's give them, I mean, okay, first of all, if you give the benefit of the people that they're sincere in their views, people are not always going to be the best informed on everything. Not everybody's going to be informed, but the people protesting, regardless, whether they're organized by a church, like the anti-abortion protests, a lot of them are organized by a church. They're like, hey, stand outside this abortion clinic, right? Okay, why am I here? Because I'm told to stand out there, right? I mean, again, that doesn't mean you probably do oppose abortion, but you might not be the most articulate advocate against abortion, right? The church guy, the pastor tells you you should stand out there. Well, you do. Is that are you the most effective advocate? Maybe not, but why shouldn't you be able to stand out there to protest it, provided you're doing it peacefully? My take is, though, that the bigger thing that people have to understand is that whoever is protesting does not necessarily represent the broader community, right? And in fact, one of the misnomers about Crowds on Demand is that we represent a minority perspective. We actually oftentimes represent a common sense majority perspective, because what happens is, in a lot of these things, you have a vocal, as you said, 10% who just show up to every meeting, whatever. So let me give you a great example is, in Los Angeles County, this is something that probably 99% of people, maybe almost 100%, would agree with. So Los Angeles County was considering a ordinance, a rule to prevent child sex offenders from camping out near schools. I don't know anyone in my of liberal MAGA who would oppose this idea, right? If you have been convicted,
I'm sure you can find somebody in this crazy world.
yeah. So I think I don't know. I'm not aware of anybody. I don't even know if Jeffrey Epstein would have opposed that. That's
an entirely different conversation.
Yeah. So the point is that okay. So this is something that I don't really know if anyone would oppose, and yet 300 protesters stormed the LA City Council to oppose this ordinance, right? 300. And I don't think there were that many people they're in support of the ordinance. So does that mean the people of Los Angeles are against this ordinance? No, it means that there's a very, very vocal minority who, for whatever reason, don't want this to occur. And a vast majority of people just assume that the leaders are going to do the right thing and do what everyone else wants. So sometimes we're actually there to organize in favor of the silent majority, because if we don't, because the people who are in that silent majority have families, they have kids, they have jobs. They can't necessarily just show up to these things unless we kind of compensate them to do it. So just take that as an example, right? Is that, if you take it, like a lot of very dumb elected officials will say, if 60 of people are for something in the audience and 10 are against it, then they're 6-1, for it. Well, that's not how it works. Though the people who are there represent maybe their own views, but they not the broader view.
Do you see yourself as like a provoking individual?
Like in what sense?
And in the sense of like this is ultimately what you're doing here is you're provoking there's not an entrapment aspect here. We talked about entrapment earlier.
Yeah.
But I just think about provoking crowds and provoking certain individuals to do certain things. And if you have a certain number of paid protesters within the crowd that are trained to provoke the crowd into doing something, they will do it.
Oh, so
right?
We don't do that. We actually specifically don't do that. So
Okay.
To answer that question, absolutely not. Again,
So you don't train people to provoke others into doing certain actions.
Well, but are you implying that we would provoke people to do something? Like, we would not provoke people to do any kind of illegal activity at all. No, because that would not suit our cause. That doesn't suit a cause, and it also happens to be illegal. Our job now.
It's very illegal, but I mean, it just seems like that is something that naturally, from a strategic perspective, would occur. If you
No,
were
it
trying
wouldn't,
to get
because
but if you were trying to accomplish a certain objective, once again, we give an example here, but like I go back to January 6th. If you were trying to make the Republicans look bad or MAGA look bad,
so of course, if you're saying that, are there people out there doing it? Absolutely. Are we doing it? No, because I've been around almost 14 years now. 14 years that we've been in business, right? We would not have been in business 14 years if we were doing any form of unlawful type of protest. Our job is we're a publicity firm specializing in kind of getting outside the box attention to causes, companies, campaigns, and really creating consciousness around issues, right? We're not there to create ruckus, right? Yeah. Are there those people? Do those people exist? Yes. But actually, when you hire us, you're actually getting a far more stable group of people. Why? Because our people want to get paid at the end of the day. They want to go back to their families at the end of the day. They're not looking to create a scene, get arrested, all of that. They want to do their thing, advocate for the cause, and then go home and get their paycheck. So in a way, when you hire Crowds on Demand, you're actually getting a far more stable group and a more predictable protest than if you try to organize it differently. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and again, I appreciate you being very honest about this. I just think about foreign countries, bad organizations, groups coming in and paying certain people, and it happens. But I think people struggle to be like, oh, this, like, I can actually see it, I can visualize it. I see an LLC beside a company name, and I know for a fact they're legitimate. It's a lot of like these dark groups. Yeah. But I guess that's kind of my question is, are there some of those organizations and groups that you know about that we can maybe discuss openly or publicly?
Well, okay, so it's important to say that there's a lot of speculative things, right? So it's important because I don't want to get sued. That I know.
We don't want a defamation lawsuit on us.
Pardon me?
We don't want a defamation lawsuit.
Well, correct, and so it's very important that I don't make a claim that I cannot verify. But there are groups that I think are encouraging. So to whether they are directly pushing it or merely encouraging and abetting it.
And while you're searching, I had a long conversation with a friend of mine who's an intel officer, still is, 2 days ago, about propaganda in general. We just talked about propagandizing a population. And it's obviously when certain organizations and countries are not doing very well from a PR perspective, they tend to shift dramatically in the opposite direction. You can kind of see, if you've been around it a while, you can kind of see the shift occur. You're like, things are not going in their direction. So something had to happen for them to be able to get positive PR again.
Well, sure. Well, I think that the way that I would look at it is that there are groups that are certainly enabling it. So one group that I has publicly, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, said that they will essentially defend people accused of, like, let's just say you're conducting an illegal form of protest. You're lying in a street or whatever, right, without a permit. So, like, it's called the National Lawyers Guild. And I like to say that they make the ACLU look like the Heritage Foundation. That's how radical left they are, right? And now, I don't... what I can say is that the National Lawyers Guild has said basically, hey, we're going to defend you if you're accused of certain things, right? And feel free to correct me, National Lawyers Guild, if I misstated your position, because the last thing, I know they're lawyers, right? But
it was right from the website, right? It's public information.
Yeah, so I would, but there are groups like that I certainly find troubling, because when you make it, now, first of all, I support the idea that everyone deserves legal representation, but I think when you are basically kind of actively saying, if you do something illegal, we've got your back, so to speak, I don't really like that idea. And by the way, the other kind of my feeling, though, is I'm a First Amendment absolutist. So I believe, I was just saying earlier that even though I despise the KKK, I support their right to protest, even though I wouldn't help them in that. So the thing is that we live in a country that actually affords us immense rights to protest peacefully and lawfully, that I abhor any form of illegal demonstration, whether it's blocking roads, vandalism, certainly violence, simply because we have the right to protest peacefully. I can protest anywhere on public land in this country. If it's public land, I can protest without a permit and with zero notice. And so how on earth do people justify unlawful protests when we live in this country where you can say the most heinous things legally, right? So I just really abhor it. And I think that partially of why I go on these podcasts is to really condemn that idea, because there's no excuse for it in a country like ours, right? And they actually make it harder, because when you have violent protests, then it actually makes all protests look bad, right? Because you can say, oh, well, look at these protesters, right? When a vast majority of protesters are doing things the right way.
Right. The weird thought that keeps coming to mind for me is this, like, future dystopian society where not somebody like yourself necessarily, but one of those groups hires or let's just say they purchase 500 robots that look like humans and act like humans. And they then program them to go to certain organizations and to protest certain events. And you are literally controlling a robot army of sorts, of AI robot armies that are protesting events. I see that occurring. When I think about the First Amendment, right, it's supposed to apply to humans. And I'm sure there will be plenty of legal battles on this.
No, that's not true. It applies to but it was a human that ordered the robots to be there. It's no different than advertised. I would say it's unequivocally the robots should be able to protest 100%. The robots are. How is it different? How is the robot protest any different from taking out a billboard ad? This is wildly hypothetical, but at some point this you could actually do. Right now you could do it, but it would be prohibitively expensive because the robots of today are really expensive. But you could totally do this today. I could have a robot out there protesting. I'm actually shocked that I haven't been asked to do this already. It's a great idea. In fact, so I
Well,
disagree with.
Adam, I'm not saying I want a percentage of that business because I don't really want a percentage of that business because that is a great idea though. But is there not something wrong with that from a
How is
moral
it different than
perspective?
how is it different than taking out a billboard advertisement or advertising? There's a lot of other forms of advertising. When you take out an ad on Facebook or on
Yep.
Instagram, is that not done through a robot?
There's got to be limits on this. I think that's my biggest
Sure, okay,
concern.
okay, but what are those limits? So do you think you should be able to
Okay, here's the limit.
do
Do
you
you think
support social media
the-
ads? Do you support the idea that you should be able to use an ad that uses an algorithm on social media?
I do,
But that's a
but
robot.
I also have a lot of issues from a
It's actually
moral
a more
perspective as
advanced
it relates to AI in general.
Oh, that's
And
fair.
I think this is what I'm trying to figure out for myself. Those are great questions. I appreciate it. But more than anything, I think I'm just trying to figure out where we draw the line.
Yeah.
Because if I cannot if not even the smartest person can discern between two things at the end of the day, right? If I have no idea that it's AI generated, and if I have no idea that that robot is actually controlled, and it is a robot.
The
If I have no idea
human-looking robot, like Data from Star
Correct.
Trek.
If I have no idea that's and like not even the smartest person in the entire world can discern whether or not that's a robot, I think there needs to be a tag of some kind. You need to be made aware that this particular
Well, I'm so glad you
product.
asked about that because let me make a pitch. I actually have a bill that I am pushing Congress to do, but of course Congress is very slow and dumb. It's called the Transparency in Political Demonstrations Act. I thought you would never ask, so I actually support what you're asking for. I actually think that all demonstrations, and you actually, funnily enough, used 500 people. That was my 500 robot people. I actually think that the bill suggests that if you are organizing a political or advocacy demonstration with more than 500 participants, you should have to disclose the net funder of that, all the funding sources, and you should disclose all the vendors. So whether it's a labor union, a church, a billionaire, advocacy group, you should show all the way from the top who's funding it down to the bottom of everyone getting paid. And I actually support that, and we are eager to comply with that once Congress passes it into law. But I'm not going to be the only one who complies. Everyone's going to have to comply.
I agree with that 100%. How much do people get
So
paid? How
call
much
your
do protesters
congressman.
typically get paid?
Call Lindsey Graham. Ask him to push it. Anyway, go on.
Okay. How much do protesters typically get paid?
So that really depends. I'll give you kind of a general sense of like how it works. First of all, it depends on the difficulty of the task, right? So some of what we do is like, we just might have people sitting in an audience at a theater when there's a product launch or a press conference, right? So that's probably easy. So that's going to be on the lower end of the pay.
What is the lower end? Is that location dependent?
Yeah, it depends, but maybe like $100 or so.
For a day? For
Yeah,
a few
like
hours? Okay.
something like that, or like I mean, I don't want to go into specifics because I don't want to give people a realistic or unrealistic idea and have people hold us to that. It really depends. It's a variable scale. But I'll put it this way: if you're organizing, let's just say in rural South Carolina, a very Republican area of South Carolina, we are organizing something that's, shall we say, more on the liberal side of things. The pay would probably have to be higher because we might not have as many liberals in our Rolodex.
Got it.
Similarly, if I'm going to organize a conservative event in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, which is, I think, the most liberal part of the country, right, that could be more expensive, right? And additionally, anything dealing with weather, like, okay, let's just say you have to be out there from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Well, obviously you're going to get paid more, or it's freaking freezing cold or piping hot, right? So a lot of it's going to depend on the relative difficulty of the task. So we kind of and our ability to assign people to each one of those tasks. But generally our pay is pretty good, and it's far in excess of minimum wage. And the reason that we pay well is because we want good people and who agree and are passionate and are going to make our clients look good.
Understood. Well, Adam, I appreciate your time this morning. I appreciate you diving into all these different questions with me, especially the moral questions. I think more than anything, I
I
think
like
that's
it.
what I battle with personally. Is just trying to figure out that where that line is. There's a lot
Yes.
of moral ambiguity in a lot of these things.
Yes.
But to your point, there's great rebuttals, and frankly, I know you've answered these questions a lot. Obviously, you've had to defend your business for the past 14 years.
As I say.
But I also I'm glad to hear that you're passing or pushing a transparency bill of sorts that will help people to better understand what's being pushed upon them and what's being shoved in front of their faces. And I think we
Absolutely.
need more of that across the board so that people can, once again, just better understand what is going on in this world that we
I
live in.
would 100% agree with that. I mean, we need more transparency because people have lost so much faith in institutions that like look at some of these investigations. People don't trust the government to investigate, and internet sleuths are discovering things that the government agencies aren't. So at this point, I think do require more transparency, and I want to be a part of that.
So on the transparency question, this is gonna be a fun final concluding question. It has nothing to do with what you do at all. But do you think we need transparency as it relates to JFK files, Epstein
Yes.
files,
Yes.
UFOs, UAPs, et cetera, as well?
Release it all. Release
Okay,
it all.
cool. Cool.
I don't. What are? First of all, I mean, the UFO. I don't know anything about that. But I think I want to know that. I mean, that's at least a current issue. So there's more justification to classify the UFO than anything to do with JFK, RFK, and MLK.
Right.
100% needs to be everything needs to be declassified there. And all of the other major investigations that have caused conspiracies, I would rather that they tell us all of this stuff, because actually sunlight might put some conspiracy theories to bed, and in some cases will put the establishment narrative to wrong. So I certainly, there's no justification for any of this stuff that's 50 plus years old. So at minimum, that needs to be released. But I think Epstein 100% needs to be released as well. I want to
Well, it's
know.
kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of thing with the information release, because you release enough information, you don't release all of it, and it's like, well, what are you
That's
hiding?
the
Why are you
problem. I
hiding?
hate that they haven't released everything with Epstein. I think you need to release 100%. And these people who sent him these depraved emails, right? But those are showing up as redacted, or in some cases the emails aren't redacted, but the sender is redacted. So how? That's crazy. That's crazy. I want to know everything. I want to know who these sickos are.
It's time for some people to go to jail. To say the
Absolutely.
least. Or worse. But hey, that's not for me to decide. That's for the legal system to decide. Adam, anything else you want to leave the crew with, the folks
Yeah,
that are
actually,
listening
I just
in?
wanted to, if I could have 90 seconds to
Absolutely.
tell people something. So, one of the things is, so we talked a lot about advocacy, but one of the things I really want to help people to do is be their own best advocates, because we are often called upon to, especially in this world where more and more of us are small business owners, we have to be our own advocates. So whether or not you're even at all involved or interested in politics, you may have to advocate with yourself because your insurance company denies your claim, or because your landlord is trying to increase your rent rate. You have to be your own best advocate. So let me just work you through in 90 seconds a few steps to do this. These are the steps that I follow when I run an advocacy campaign. Number one, what is your objective? Okay, I don't want my rent to go up. I want my insurance company to cover my bill. Figure out what your objective is, be specific. Number two, figure out who can help you achieve your objective. Don't yell at the customer service agent who can't help you. Find the supervisor who can, right? Number three, figure out how to persuade the person to help you, right? Moral arguments don't always work, right? Oh my God, you can't increase my rent because I live here with my kids and my dog. Well, the landlord also has a kid and a dog, so they don't necessarily care about that. They might care more about you being a really good tenant, and maybe you promise to pay more of the utilities or something, right? What is it that you can do to help them, right? Don't use a moral argument. Generally, moral arguments don't work. Number four, then figure out what success looks like and make sure you didn't just get lip service. That lip service is, oh, we hear your concerns, we'll look into it, we have a committee. Okay, that's lip service. You just got screwed, right? Make sure they actually did what you asked for, and then be relentless in following up to the extent that you didn't. So people need to, if you use those steps, you'll find that you'll be very effective in being your own best advocate.
Well, Adam, thank you so much again for joining today. I appreciate, once again, all the insight, and also for helping people to better understand that it's not a conspiracy period, that people get paid to be protesters as well. So
thanks, Cameron. I really appreciate it. You have a good one.
You as well.